Hear a hut, Nick. On the Lord hut, hear a hut, Nick, Nick. On the Ricky Ticky Low while living #1 Nickelodeon.
Nickelodeon, if you want to know about it, it's a kid-owned environment.
It didn't feel like the version of what an adult was telling a kid to watch. It felt like really what kids were into.
It just had a voice that kind of had respect for kids.
We were the anti-Disney. We were the anti-Saturday morning.
It was weird and wacky.
One of the things that people, I think, don't know about Nickelodeon was how many women there were at the top.
Kids can smell from 1,000 miles away when they're being sold a bunch of crap versus something that is a kind of original production that is targeting them specifically.
From a kid's point of view, life can really suck because grown-ups make the rules.
If it was a tiny bit naughty, kids would really appreciate that and feel that it was real and it was really for them.
I mean, the stuff we got away with was insane.
The inmates were very much running the asylum back then. It was way easier to slip stuff in.
Ren and Stimpy.
The Keenan and Kel show.
All that, Hey Dude.
Legends of the Hidden Temple.
You can't hear that on television.
Rocko's Modern Life.
The Adventures of Pete and Pete.
Salute your shorts.
Double Dare.
Doug.
Rugrats.
The Secret World of Alex Mack.
Clarissa Explains It All.
Are You Afraid of the Dark?
The team of people that worked there at that time were the most creative and talented people I've ever met. So there's all those crazy things that happened that, you know, nobody knows about.
In the very beginning, there was an experiment in Columbus, Ohio called Cube, and it was interactive TV.
In the very near future, Warner Cable will be introducing an expanded system of communication in Columbus, Ohio. It will involve television, plus what is now known as cable television. But it will go beyond both. It starts with this little black box. The big thing then in Columbus was this whole interactive thing. They had these buttons at home and you could interact, and it was television of the future. And everybody thought, oh my God, this is, revolutionary. These buttons offer the subscriber the capability literally to talk back to the television set. You can press them to give your views on a subject or take part in a game. You can answer questions asked of you.
Ever feel that nothing exciting happens to you? That life is just passing you by?
Should the possession and use of marijuana be legalized? Button 1 would be for yes, button 2 would be no. Touch now.
You could sit at home and press buttons and actually get involved with shows. We had a show called Talent Search, and it was sort of like today's American Idol. If some act was on and you didn't like it, you could press a button at home and see the percentages on the screen, and that act was gone within a minute and a half.
You can bet your life it isn't her, but could she love, could she woo, could she coo?
One of the people who was the scientist behind Cube was a woman named Dr. Vivian Horner. It was her pedagogy that went behind the early version of Nickelodeon, which actually was called Pinwheel.
It was puppets, it was focused, I think, for the first time, right to a specific audience, to children.
Button 2 in the community column brings you Pinwheel. This is programming designed especially for the 2 to 5-year-old preschool children.
It's a shower for a flower, a bath for a bee, a wash for a squash, and a drink for a tree.
When you don't have a lot of money to do, because you're in Columbus, Ohio, you tend to get pretty creative. It was better in some sense because it was raw and there wasn't all that great production value. And I think in a sense that was better for kids. It was more real for a child, I think, watching than seeing all this great New York or Hollywood production. It was sort of the beginning of everything in terms of cable.
So when we wrapped the Columbus versions of Pinwheel, all that crew, they went to New York and thought, we should not do just one show over and over and over again. Let's do a network for kids. And I don't know, why don't we call it Nickelodeon?
Introducing Nickelodeon. Children's programming that's fit for children. 13 hours of programming a day, 7 days a week, that will make them wonder, laugh, ponder, and think.
The story I always understood as the origin story of Nickelodeon was that the Warner Brothers, they had bought a Nickelodeon machine, a movie machine, and they were screening movies on their Nickelodeon in their garage. So when this fabulous company went into business with American Express, their first channel was called Nickelodeon.
So those early days of Nickelodeon had sort of an old school feel to it, shows that had, some kind of educational value to it. But there was nothing very distinctive about Nickelodeon in those days. But we call those days the green vegetables days at Nickelodeon because it was good for you, but it wasn't something really that kids wanted. There was a lot of shows that were very much about kids who could play concert piano and kids who were jumping out of airplanes and, parachuting and just amazing kids who did incredible things. Those shows made kids feel terrible about themselves because there's that kid on TV and he's doing something amazing and I can barely get through 3rd grade.
Nickelodeon had been run by a guy from the toy business, Cy Schneider, who had his opportunity, and then it was passed on to Jerry Laybourne.
Geraldine Laybourne is the most progressive thinker the world of media has ever seen.
The first time I heard Jerry Laybourne talk about Nickelodeon, it was about her background as a teacher and how kids were always first.
Part of what's important to her is that whatever she's working on is to put it in the form of a cause, a mission. And I think she wanted to change the world.
So Jerry assembled a core group of her staff. We all went out to Jerry's house and we brainstormed and we pitched ideas. And then Jerry's son Sam came through the living room at one point with a very typical 8-year-old's lament. Jerry watched as he left and she said, "Boy, it's tough to be a kid." We realized, almost every one of us, almost instantly, that there was tremendous value and dignity in letting kids be kids.
She had the idea to go out and talk to kids. We actually had an arrangement with the Watchung Elementary School in Montclair, New Jersey. And in exchange for giving them a television set, we were allowed to come into the classroom and talk to kids. And we talked to kids about what was going on in their lives. We didn't say, do you like this television show or that television show? We said, what does it feel like to be a kid?
Mothers were going to work for the first time, divorce rates were high, kids were either coming home alone or into school, after-school programs. They needed a place where they could just be kids, and that became our mantra. We had a logo that was a silver ball and multiple colors, and it was so condescending you can't believe it. It's this romp through cliches about kids.
The original theme song had been done by the London Symphony Orchestra. Tough to find kids that would connect into that sound.
So Fred Seibert and Alan and I were trying to figure out what is going to be something that kids will attach to. Now, Fred and Alan had been involved in the MTV logo. They knew that a participatory logo was about as good as it could get. And we wanted kids to own Nickelodeon. That was our intention.
We had a lot of success with the MTV logo that we had developed. It was the first logo I knew about that changed. And our attitude was, television moves, it should be raucous, it should be noisy. We thought the same thing when we got to Nickelodeon. Let's represent this audience, which is noisy and crazy and fun and irreverent and all of that stuff.
And I'll never forget the day Fred Seibert stood up in a meeting and said, "And orange. It's orange." And we said, "Why? What? Orange?" And the one promo that has stuck in my head my whole life has been, "Orange, you glad you got your Nickelodeon?"
Aren't you glad you got your Nickelodeon? Aren't you glad you
watching,
got
you watching,
your Nickelodeon?
you watching Nick?
Aren't you glad
You watching, you watching, you watching Nick?
Fred picked orange because it was a happy color. Kids responded to it.
Pantone 021, which is the orange color of Nickelodeon's original logo. It was the perfect color because it went with nothing.
You could do anything you wanted with that color and any number of shapes, but you couldn't change the typeface and you couldn't change the color.
It was its own thing that would slap on the screen the same way that the MTV logo was a spray-painted TV to say, this is thematically defacing whatever is behind it. That was my attitude about the orange logo as well, is that it sort of was there to deface whatever was behind it.
You know, in the early years, we couldn't get anyone really in the United States to sell programs to us. And I remember talking to a big syndicator who had all of the big animated series at the time. And he said to me, and I quote, "Honey, I'll never sell a program to you. The business is on broadcast and in syndication." Okay, fine, we'll go out and find it ourselves. We would buy series from Japan and have them dubbed. We would buy French series and have them dubbed. We would buy shorts, and it probably wasn't until we screened You Can't Do That on Television that came from Canada that we had the moment that crystallized really where this was going. I think that show informed everything that we did going forward.
You Can't Do That on Television, I think, was like, oh, that is Nickelodeon. Whenever I would think about that show, I was like, that's Nickelodeon. Because they do that slime thing and those kids are like hanging out in those lockers.
Hey, Adam. Yes, Matthew. I had this nightmare. I dreamt that I got slimed, told pathetic jokes, and was humiliated in front of millions of people.
Yeah, Matthew, that nightmare is still going on. It's called being on this show.
Wake up soon.
We put a show called You Can't Do That on Television on the air, which was a comedy skit show. And really, it was a show that understood kids' needs so deeply. And it really turned a kid's world upside down.
Time for dessert, kids.
Boo! We hate desserts. Can't we have more Brussels sprouts and liver?
Yeah. Normally I'd say no, but now we have liver and Brussels sprout ice cream.
So at the end of the day, a kid would feel better watching You Can't Do That on Television because their parents weren't that bad, their teachers weren't that bad, their principal would never put them in a dungeon.
It was so cool to be able to watch something that wasn't talking down to you. You look back and it's comedy genius, really. You look at it and you're just like, man, they were just so ahead of their time. But, you know, if your parents saw it, you'd be like, okay, it's a little pushing the envelope. But that's what was cool about it.
Simone.
Well, I think You Can't Do That on Television was the most critical piece of programming that Nickelodeon ever purchased.
And I think one of the geniuses who really informed a lot of what happened at Nickelodeon was a guy named Roger Price, who was the producer of You Can't Do That on Television. Roger believed that all kids feel stupid and alone on the inside. And I think that that was such a powerful truth, that he articulated.
All of these crazy guys who went to Cambridge and Oxford were creating this completely inappropriate television, and Roger was of that vintage. He tried to sell the concept of a TV show about kids who could just be who they are. And these very staid producers said, "You can't do that on television." He said, "Yes, I can, and that's what I'm going to call it." Kids all over the world said, "I get to be me. And if I really am lucky, maybe I get to be slimed."
I think it was super clever because, the trigger, and I don't even want to say it, you know what it is.
Like, what else could there be in that green stuff?
Well, I don't know. See, that's why I'm
You get punished for not knowing, right? So that's the idea there. You are going to get dumped on if you don't know the answer. Just a physical incarnation of this thing where kids are just dumped on. And I think that's how kids feel.
It turned out it's really great to be slimed. I've been slimed several times. It's warm, it's wonderful, and so the kids loved getting slimed, and they were paid an extra $50. I never got paid for being slimed, but
I think if I told you what slime was made out of, I'd probably have to kill you.
Nickelodeon owes a lot, obviously, to You Can't Do That on Television, not just kind of the elements of green slime, that became iconic for Nickelodeon, but I think the whole way of relating to kids in a very honest, authentic, real, and not, fancy or polished or, pretty way.
On your mark. Get set. Go! These two teams are in detention trying to pop water balloons on top of their partner's dunce cap. Who's ever first?
Well, if you ask me, Double Dare put Nickelodeon on the map. I mean, slime was there, and, I don't know, and you can't. We started to bring eyeballs to the set. But I think we were the first appointment TV that kids had.
The question was, how do you make a low-cost, high-volume program that could really perform well for kids in this time slot that we were looking to win?
Ela Duke, Jeffrey Darby, and Mike Klinghoffer were in a room talking about shows, talking about development, talking about games, and one of them said, "Do you remember when you used to dare someone to do something when you were a kid?" And the response from somebody else in the room was, "Well, that was fun, but it was when you double dared them that it got really interesting."
Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Double Dare. It's the game that doubles the challenge from your brains right down to your feet.
They shot a pilot in Jeffrey Darby's basement. They wanted Jeffrey because Jeffrey was like the king of Nickelodeon, and Jerry Laburn thought everything he did was magical. And so they, well, why don't you do it, Jeffrey? Well, if you see the pilot, you see why Jeffrey should have never done it.
We start this with a toss-up round, so hands on the buzzer. Here's the question. For $10 and control of the game, 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by water. But what is the name of the largest ocean in the Earth? And Mrs. Mister?
Atlantic?
Wrong. I'm so sorry.
I was 33 years old. I didn't want to do a kid show. I didn't even know what the hell it was. I just wanted to get on television on a regular gig.
This physical challenge is going to be very easy. Amy, why don't you come up over here, and Mike, right over there. Have you ever been to Hawaii? Never been there. It's a great place. You've never learned to hula, though.
What makes Mark special is that he doesn't talk down to kids. I mean, that he's just that guy who's like a friend. Having somebody who's personable and likable, I think made him the right choice for hosting that show.
How about a round of applause for Amy and Mike for doing such a darn good job there for us? All right, very nice.
So first day on the set of Double Dare, we were all excited and nervous, and the bigwigs came down from New York, and we just wanted to get it right. Well, keep in mind, it was the first time I had ever done the obstacle course, and I had a lot going on in my mind, but it was also everybody else's first time. So the very first obstacle was called Nightmare, and there was a pillow filled with feathers, and there was a flag somewhere hidden in that pillow.
Come on, get that flag. You can't help. Find the flag. Find the flag. It's in there somewhere.
We thought somebody put the flag in, but they didn't put the flag in. So for 60 seconds, they're going through the feathers. There's no flag.
3, 2. Sorry,
sorry, your time is up. We never even got to our first flag. Gee, I feel bad about that. There is a flag in there somewhere, I promise. We just, unfortunately, don't have time to go in and find it, but there is a flag in there. And we're only to obstacle number 1. We're cutting. Great. Thank goodness.
It looked scary. Here was this stiff host wearing penny loafers, trying to control kids, and we go to an obstacle course that they're supposed to run 8 obstacles in 60 seconds. I think it took us 2 hours to do a 60-second obstacle course.
We have to shoot 4 shows a day to make our budget. And we only get 1 show shot that day, and I am beside myself.
After the fact, I went to Jerry and I went, are we okay? What's going on? Oh, you were fantastic. The show was fantastic. Little did I know, she had said to Klinghoffer, what have I got myself into here? I've sent these boys to go down and play television who have never done it. So she gets on the train to go back to New York going, okay, I'll probably be fired in a week. And then it became what it became.
Every weekday, Nickelodeon gives kids the physical challenges they want on Double Dare. Flying Zucchini Brothers, William Tell, Rain on Your Parade, Weatherman, Top Gum, Scrambled Egg, and more. The Physical Challenge. Another reason to watch Double Dare every weekday on Nickelodeon.
Double Dare really went for everything that kids laughed at that they weren't supposed to laugh at. Having kids dive into pools of slime and come out of it just dripping with goo. It was epic. It became another cornerstone of Nickelodeon.
I just love Double Dare because it was, food-based and people swimming around and eating and competing at the same time was like the best 3 things in the world.
I don't know, it was like weird and gross and disgusting and fun. I just remember you had to reach up into a nose for a flag or something. Who doesn't want to do that?
Our safety record was really good, with the exception of 1 kid. As he was coming down, he flipped over. Now, I could have sworn he broke his neck. I thought his head snapped. And you can hear me saying during the entire time, are you okay? Do you feel all right? Are you okay? And, they got to obstacle number 6. And you can see me, I put my arm around the kid. I said, you doing all right? You doing all right? That stuff. So then afterwards, we go back in the control room. We watch it on slow-mo. This person shouldn't be alive today. I mean, his head went this way, his neck went this way. It was frightening. We get done, and his father comes in. And he goes, lucky for you, my kid's all right. Yeah, thanks. The large screen TV was obstacle number 7. Yeah. I won't sue you if you give us the large screen TV. Hey, whatever you want, man. You want that large screen TV? Anything else you want? You want a piece of the set? What else do you want? What else can we give you?
So the success of Double Dare really showed how important original programming was for Nickelodeon. Not just for ratings, but for Nickelodeon to have its own identity.
Yeah, it became a hit rather quickly. And then they asked us to start doing personal appearances. So Robin and I started to go to malls. Well, 10,000 people would show up. And then we realized, oh my God, this is huge. Why don't we take it and start putting it in arenas? Then there became a competition for kids because Nickelodeon owned kids. I think from that point on, they always have. Then when they made the deal at Universal and families were forced to bring their kids down to be a part of it, that's pretty heavy. When you plan your whole vacation around a cable network, that's nuts.
Nickelodeon is the world's leading television network for children. 2 sound stages are the site of live action programming. While sharing in the excitement of taking part in programming designed just for them, children have a close-up look at how television is produced.
At one point in the late 80s, we were producing 7 shows in 7 different places. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we had a studio, a central studio with a lot? I knew that we couldn't afford it, so I tried to think about who needs us, who would possibly benefit from having Nickelodeon on their lot. And Universal Studios Florida was just getting started.
Jerry Laybourne, who was brilliant, went to Universal Studios management, said, down here in Florida, you got competitors down the street, and they got something you don't have. They got a mouse. We can be your mouse.
Welcome to the Nick Studios, ladies and gentlemen. We are live
First time in 11 years we're doing a live broadcast on Nickelodeon, and it means we are coming to you from our new home right here in Orlando, Florida. These are your studios where you can come to watch Nick being made, and you can audition to be on a Nick show.
It was a place where shows got produced because it was supposed to be a real working studio. So there were 2 stages. We were probably 2 floors high. And then on the 3rd floor, I think there was a glass walkway that went between the 2 studios. So the tour could look down into either stage from this glass walkway and see us actually producing shows.
The Orlando Nickelodeon experience was wild.
You would see this Nickelodeon tour and you would all see these kids looking through a window, looking at us like a bunch of like talented fish.
At first you were very aware of it, but after a while you just forgot. So we would be in the hair and makeup room or in the wardrobe room, and then all of a sudden you just like turn around and there would just be like a kid with his face pressed up against the glass, like. And so it created this, like, it was like this zoo effect. And so you really felt like you were always on.
Okay, folks, here we are in Production Alley. If you look up on the monitors, that's what they're doing next door in Soundstage 19, where they're recording Family Double Dare. But this is Production Alley, some of the behind-the-scenes rooms. The first room at the back there, that's the makeup room. Of course, with those bright lights, every star, every contestant on Nick needs to wear makeup to look their best.
After a while, they wanted every part of our lives exposed, and I hated that. Especially when you're a performer, you need to be in makeup and hair. And I went to management and said, I'm begging you to close a curtain while we're getting made up and get that microphone out of there. Well, they said they wouldn't do it. Okay, fine. So I waited one night till everybody was gone, and I went in and pulled the guts out of all the microphones in there. And it took them a month. They couldn't figure out why the hell everything's plugged in, but I ripped all the innards out of the microphone so they couldn't hear what the hell we were saying because I didn't want to be bothered.
Sorry, no pictures, no pictures.
That was our backyard. Like, Universal Studios was our backyard. In between like breaks and stuff like that, in between sketches, we would go hang out on the Back to the Future ride.
We would like sneak into the park at lunchtime and like go ride like Terminator 2. That was like the ride at the time.
Why kids wanted to be slimed, I don't know. When we built Universal Studios, we had a whole room where people would get slimed on a regular basis.
It was part of the tour attraction. They'd go in and they'd play some Nickelodeon games that were similar to the games that were played on Nickelodeon's game shows, and one kid would get slimed, and it was a great time.
Nickelodeon Studios was a big step forward for us because it said to the world that we were big. We had a big physical presence. So when people would come, when advertisers would come down here and see us, we were no longer a cable television channel. We were something gigantic for kids.
Nickelodeon Studios became the thing that got kids to say to their parents, we gotta go to Universal Studios Florida. And the lines to get into that attraction were enormous.
It gave us a home base. It was in your face, Disney, you know, here we are, we've got this other thing going on right now. And it really created an anchor and attraction, I think, that extended further that sense of kids being able to touch and see and participate in this thing they love, Nickelodeon.
The Nickelodeon team was constantly pushing itself. We were constantly thinking about, well, what should we be doing next? You know, how did that work out? And very conscious of not repeating ourselves. So going into live action with a show like Hey Dude was the next chapter.
Hey, dude.
It's a little wild and a little strange when you make your home out on the range.
Hey Dude was a critical moment for Nickelodeon. To do a scripted show, to do something that other networks did. They did scripted television. So it was critical that this was written for kids. And you know, you look back at some of the writers that we had, Lisa Melamed, Graham Yost. I mean, these are real writers in Hollywood.
Hey Dude was one of Nickelodeon's first scripted series. I would say almost the equivalent of Saved by the Bell, but on a dude ranch.
Hey Dude, half-hour live-action comedy. It was about kids working at a dude ranch in Arizona.
that has just been purchased by a guy from New York, so a real city slicker, a real dude, Mr. Ernst, and he's there with his son, Buddy.
Beautiful. Just beautiful. That's just beautiful, isn't it? It is hot. Oh, but beautiful. Oh.
And for a season, there was a dog, and then that was just too much work, so Cassie just kind of disappeared.
Cassie, go get it, get it.
There were no veterans on the show. There were no people who had been working in the business for years who could say, oh, don't do that, or we were all just figuring it out.
You know, it was an inexpensive cable show for kids, but we never wrote down to it.
I always said to people it was a little bit like writer's boot camp in that, okay, let's write the classics. We've got Brad and Ted, who, you know, girl and boy, who really like each other, but they're always fighting. Well, let's have them get handcuffed together and lose the key. That's a classic. Dave Brisbane, he played Mr. Ernst, the ranch owner. Let's have him trip and fall into a water trough. Man, we went into the water trough. Whenever in doubt, have someone fall in the water trough.
We shot Hey Dude in Tucson, Arizona, in the middle of the desert. It was the Tanque Verde Ranch, which is actually a place that people go for vacations, for a dude ranch experience. But we had some property off of the ranch itself, and they built sets.
It was really interesting. They really developed a real hybrid way of making a TV show.
What they had miscalculated was the heat and the locations, because the sets weren't air conditioned. And one time we put a thermometer on the hat of the boom man, and it was 126 degrees. We could fry eggs.
Everyone felt they were lucky to be working. They were having fun, very little attitude or anything.
I think we absolutely bonded more because we were living on location. I mean, what do you do when you're 17 years old in the middle of the desert making this show? But it was the best. It was super fun, and we all had the best time.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, our stories were about the kids taking care of each other and being generous to each other and being good friends. And I think if you have the privilege of putting something out there in the world, that's what it should be.
I think because we had learned a lot about ourselves and had been successful with Hey Dude, we felt ready to take on more scripted.
The idea for Salute Your Shorts came about because I was a counselor at summer camp up in Maine, and I met a guy named Tom Hill. We decided to take our summer camp experience and put it into a big humor book called Salute Your Shorts. Nickelodeon had just begun creating new shows for kids, and they were looking for things, and they thought that camp would be a perfect arena for them because it was kids in a kid's environment, and it was kids living by their own rules.
We run, we jump, we swim and play. We row and go on trips. But the things that last forever are our dear friendships.
Camp Wanna.
We hold you in our hearts.
And when we think about you, it makes me wanna fart.
As we were casting, one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we were doing was to get kids who were natural. We wanted less acting, and we wanted more normal kids.
I remember casting for the pilot when it was me as Budnick and Michael as Donkey Lips. I remember feeling like this is gonna work.
Meet my best friend in the entire world. This is Eddie Donkey Lips Gelf.
I can hawk a loogie 8 feet in the air and catch it with my tongue.
I lived with just my father, and he was like a single parent family. We couldn't afford cable at that time in our life. So I was literally working on the Nickelodeon show and not being able to watch it at that moment.
Being a child actor in Los Angeles, and then also just the kind of upbringing that I had, I wasn't actually exposed to that much diversity. So I was the only black kid on the show, you know? So at that time, that was very diverse.
We were trying to break the rules. We were trying to do things that were that had never been done before. My goal was to make it look as cinematic and as large as possible. And so I pitched the show saying that the camera would be up on the roof, under the bed, it would be behind the ball, and we always wanted to do things differently.
Hey everybody, it's Awful Waffle time! Awful Waffle! Awful Waffle! What's an Awful Waffle?
So one of the questions a lot of people want to know is, what is an awful waffle? Well, we don't truly know.
The awful waffle, I've never heard it explained in detail. It has something to do with like a tennis, some sort of racket and syrup. And from there you can use your imagination, or ask Steve, maybe he'll finally spill the beans.
Do you want to know the secret of the awful waffle? There's some secrets that cannot be told, and the secret of the awful waffle is one of them. Did ever receive pushback from Nickelodeon? Of course. They were the studio, and they were ultimately in charge of what got on and what the rules were. One of the big pushbacks was, we had an episode where a kid was going to sneak out of the bunk and he was going to go down to the lodge and he was going to steal candy. Note from network: children cannot steal candy. The big problem was obesity. We were very concerned with obesity and healthy eating. That's what the network said. So we had to change it, and instead the child had to sneak out of his bunk, sneak down to the lodge, risk being thrown out, and he had to go and steal an orange.
It was like being at camp. The crew, we had the same sort of group of people, and it was fun. We had a lot of fun on that show.
We were able to tell stories where the kid didn't have to win at the end. There was disappointment. There were bullies. Kids at home responded to that. Those were real world problems that they were facing, and so now they were able to watch characters on the screen who reflected their lives at home. I got to go to work and have pie fights. I got to go to work and play dodgeball. There was no better time in my professional career than making Salute Your Shorts.
It all started right here on a 50-yard line with a sky-high whirling discus throw that killed an innocent squid.
Pete and Pete was a very weird show. Like, it wasn't for everybody. And because of that, I think what people latched onto was that sort of weirdness. People used to say it was Twin Peaks meets The Wonder Years.
Pete and Pete, oh my gosh. I mean, if you watch that show now, have you watched it recently? It is brilliant.
I think the goal of Pete and Pete was to tell a story the way kids tell stories, where it's just one big stream of consciousness, a burst of images and half-completed thoughts, that underneath it all was a layer of deep nostalgia, but on top of that it was sort of filtered through a very fractured mindset of the narrator. I think one of the things that made people realize that Pete and Pete was something different was in our opening credits. We give a tattoo a credit, and we give a plate and Mom's head their own credits.
Petunia was my tattoo. Nobody knows how I got it, but every time I shake my wrist like this and I can make her dance, my mom fainted. So I had to wear long sleeve shirts even in the summer. I've seen a lot of Petunia tattoos, all pretty unique. A lot of people are like, hey, is this tattoo real? I was like, no, it's not. It's not real. I was 7 years old.
It was interesting that we could get away with that then. I mean, you know, she's sort of a partly clad woman. I mean, it's like a real hardcore tattoo, something an old sailor would have.
Someone did something illegal to a child, and we put it on Nickelodeon. The main difference between Big Pete and Little Pete would have to be that Little Pete is secure in his childlike imagination and brain. But Big Pete was always struggling with, do I want to stay a kid? Do I want to grow up? He's at the crossroads and I'm not there yet. And I want him to stay with me, and he wants to stay too, but he also has his own friends in high school.
Big Pete and Ellen's relationship, as we're introduced to it in the beginning, is you're a girl and you're a friend, but you're not a girlfriend.
Listen, you're a girl and you're a friend, but you're not a girlfriend.
And that's from Pete's point of view. But we do see their relationship develop over time, both in The Day of the Dot, which was early on in our series production, and the Valentine's Day Massacre, which was one of our specials. You can see that, you know, Pete and Ellen also might have feelings for each other. And that, I think, helps kids understand, you know, about growing up. Maybe your childhood friends turn into something else.
There were a lot of excellent musician cameos that were on Pete and Pete. Catherine Diekman, who was the director, she had directed Shiny Happy People, she directed Stan. Because of her contacts, she was able to get Michael Stipe to be on the show. I think once we got Michael Stipe on the show, we had the cool cred. So then it was like, well, let's see if we can get Iggy Pop. Iggy Pop's like, oh yeah, I'll do it. Iggy Pop was so cool. He just wanted to hang and do more stuff. So they would just start adding him into scenes because he wanted to hang out and he wanted to stay.
I'm sorry, Gumdrop, but I'd have to be an idiot to let you go trick-or-treating.
Artie, the strongest man in the world, was a character that became Little Pete's bodyguard and personal protector. And he's a guy who wears pajamas and can move houses and fly, apparently, if he moves fast enough.
Some people didn't think he existed. He just lived in the kid's imagination. Some people thought he was like disgusting, and that tight-fitting outfit certainly didn't help the argument.
My mom didn't like that he wore the tights, though. The first time Toby put on the tights, I don't know if he was wearing the thickest underwear. And so, you know, my mom was like, who's this guy running around in tights, anatomically outlined? Like, you get this guy an extra pair of boxers or undies or something, come on. We would, you know, go on all sorts of crazy adventures together, and then one day, he had to leave me.
You are a different Viking now. Yes, I have to go.
No!
Yes. Everything you need to learn is in here. Out there is some boy who needs me. He's small. He's puny, like you were.
But Artie, you're my best friend.
I always will be, my little Viking.
For me personally, as a kid, like that resonated with me because that was exactly where I was at in that moment. You know, as being like 5th or 6th grade and people starting to not do kid things anymore. And it was a nice way of showing that sort of crossroads to other kids. And I think that those episodes actually, you know, really resonated with people that like the show for that reason.
I know that I'm still nostalgic for that time in history sometimes when you were younger and didn't know so much stuff, and ice cream was the most important thing on like a hot afternoon in the summer. Being a show about growing up and being that people hopefully never stop growing up, it'll hopefully always be important to them.
Hi, I'm Clarissa. Clarissa Darling.
Clarissa really captured what we called the middle-aged kid. We realized in conversations that we were having with kids that life got tricky in about 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade.
Some mornings you just don't want to go to school.
By the time you figured out who you were as a kid, you were thrown into this preteen space that was uncomfortable. Clarissa really became representative of that kid.
Clarissa, the only abnormal child of 2 perfectly normal parents. Unless, of course, you count him.
She was really relatable, and it was funny how, you know, she was always making fun of her brother and how she just had kind of the quirky parents that kind of let her just be herself.
She was smart and interesting and marched to the beat of her own drummer, and I just wanted to be her best friend.
Did you know I like to break the metal things off pens and use them to clean my toenails?
No.
Clarissa Darling was, she was a lot like me. She was just a girl who was tough, thick-skinned, creative. She was very stylish, which I was not.
Talk about a wardrobe, huh?
You know, just kind of nonconformist, doesn't care what anyone thinks, and is gonna pave her own way.
All I know is I like to change my mind all the time.
Clarissa Explains It All changed the world. She was the first female character who wasn't sitting by the phone waiting for the boy to call.
Clarissa is a smart, independent, self-assured 14-year-old girl. Clarissa is a feminist.
I think girls are fantastic. I think they're really interesting, and I think actually boys like girls, even though they say they don't. I think they deeply do. I just think they don't like girlish shows because they're produced in a stupid way. They hit on stereotypes of girls.
You know, the wise people of show business were always quick to tell you that girls will watch shows starring boys, but boys will not watch shows starring girls.
And Clarissa kind of debunked that, really. When Clarissa came on, there were just as many boy viewers in the demographic as there were girls. So it kind of I think the ratings were better than they expected because it had a much wider demographic.
Mom, don't you realize that if I don't watch TV, I won't be able to keep up with the cultural level of my peers?
Trying to create Clarissa was just mainly that I was thinking of every cool girl that I knew. And I kind of, amalgamated all those into this girl.
That was a big audition process. I think it was the third audition. And I was sitting with Mitchell. It was like an interview process thing. And he wanted to talk to me and he said, "Do you like the New Kids on the Block?" And I went, "Oh, I hate them." And then I went, "Oh no, this guy's in Hollywood. Like, he probably knows them. And everyone loves them. And why did I say that?" And he goes, "Well, who do you like?" And I said, "I like They Might Be Giants." And he was like, "Okay." And that stuck with him. Then They Might Be Giants became a big part of Clarissa. We had the posters on the wall, and I think we mentioned them a few times.
I like Twizzlers, Jawbreakers, and Sugar Bombs. John, the one without the glasses, and They Might Be Giants.
It turns out that he loved those answers because I wasn't, conforming to what all the little girls loved New Kids on the Block, and I couldn't stand them.
She was like flawless in her presentation. She was utterly charming and relaxed, but she had none of that fakey kid actor stuff, which I was terrified of.
You can't teach it. You can't pretend it's there when it's not there. Some people just have it, and she was a star.
Hey, if you're looking for advice, you never have to look far.
My mom wouldn't let them touch my eyebrows. They weren't allowed to pluck them. I barely wore lipstick. There was like no eye makeup. It was just kind of a concealer, a little blush to make me look alive on camera under the bright, bright lights, and that was it, really. But I think that's what people related to. Like, yeah, I know that girl, or I am that girl,
When I went to do a theme song, I just went to the coolest girl that I knew. And the coolest girl I knew was Rachel Sweet. And I didn't really give her any direction at all. That's all Rachel.
Our goal with Clarissa was to get Clarissa to be really interesting. She had a computer, she had a friend, Sam, who climbed in her window.
The core idea of Sam was that he was a boy who was a friend, but not a boyfriend. And that was, if you talk about what was sort of unique and forward-looking about it, that was it.
The way I see it, love is a roller coaster.
You mean it makes you barf?
No. Once you get to the top, the only thing you can do is come down.
It was great to see her break the fourth wall, literally talking to the audience and talking to the camera.
Since we're going to be hanging out a lot, and I'm going to explain all the things that go on around here, I think you should know a few things about me.
There's a lot of speculation about what Clarissa would do as an adult. There was a book written. Mitchell wrote a book called Things I Can't Explain. I hold very dear to the things that were dear to her when she was younger because that's what I wrapped my character in. So I feel like she would be in New York. She would be loving New York. Probably dated Sam, didn't end up with him. Those high school ones, they can be a little rocky. Marrying some kind of creative type or, just living the high life in New York.
We felt that we were a full network for kids, and the obvious missing piece was news. The real idea behind Nick News was to nurture a better group of political candidates for the sake of our democracy. We tried to figure out who in the world tells stories about the news, and it was Linda Ellerby.
At Christmas, many people go home for the holidays. What if you don't have a home to go to? Many homeless people we see on the streets seem to be alone. But what you may not have seen are the thousands of homeless families across the country. There are kids your age with no home.
How do you tell stories so kids feel like they're part of the world, not frightened by the world? We weren't trying to break stories. We weren't trying to heighten things. We were trying to make it understandable.
The HIV virus that I have attained, I will have to retire from the Lakers.
When Magic Johnson was diagnosed HIV positive, I called David Stern and I said, if you ever want this explained to kids, Linda and I are ready to do this.
When Magic Johnson went on television and said he was HIV positive, he also said he wanted to help kids know more about AIDS and safer sex. Good.
So when she went on the set with Magic Johnson, he didn't know anything about what she was going to do. And the first thing she said was,
How many people sitting here are HIV positive?
And these 3 little kids raise their hand. And one of them starts to sob. And God bless Magic Johnson, who just calms her down.
That I want people to know that we're just normal people.
Oh, you don't have to cry. You don't have to cry. Because we are normal people, okay? We are. You just want to be treated like that, right? You just want your friends to play with you and call you up and come by and still have sleepovers and things like that, right? Yes. And it's okay to cry. It's okay to cry.
It was really magical television. There was a sign on my door from a newspaper clipping. If it ain't broke, fix it anyway, which is really what you have to do. You know, we were so successful. We had 56% of all kid TV viewing. We were growing at 36% a year with a 40% profit margin. So we had to continually reinvent.
We had done a lot of animation in our shorts work, so we were starting to get comfortable with the kind of animation, the style of animation that was reflective of Nickelodeon, the channel, the environment, the tone, the sense of humor. And Vanessa Coffey was hired to really put Nickelodeon into the animation business.
Vanessa Coffey is just an amazing person and a great visionary. The thing that Vanessa did that nobody else would do is she says, I want them to be creator-driven original pieces. That's big. Things that were being on TV was, you know, it was the Ninja Turtles and Where's Waldo's. It's things that had books and games and stuff behind it.
Basically, it was if you had a toy, then you could get a show. Transformers, G.I. Joe, My Little Pony, commercials, basically for toys. And after a while, I just didn't want to do that anymore. So they said, why don't you go out and find stuff that you like? So in 2 weeks, I came back with Doug, Rugrats, and Ren and Stimpy.
It still is amazing to me to think back that those are your first 3 projects and they turn into your first 3 animated hits.
You won't find them in Never Neverland. They're not squishy and sweet, and they don't make you go goo-galoo. They're the Nicktoons. Doug, Ren and Stimpy, the Rugrats turn to the Nicktoons every Sunday morning starting at 10, 9 Central on Nick.
With Rugrats, Arlene Klasky had this idea, because she had small children, of, you know, what would it be from their point of view?
And she said, I want to do a show about babies. I thought, what do I do with babies, 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 babies? That night, I went to sleep thinking about babies. And I remember when my youngest brother came home from the hospital. You know, he's like a week old, so his eyes aren't focusing, and he's drooling, and he can't lift his head, you know, and I thought, he can't be that stupid. I bet he's faking me out. I bet when we leave the room, he gets up and talks. So I go into the pitch with Vanessa, and I said, a bunch of incognizant babies, but when the adults leave the room, it turns out the babies can talk. And she looks at me and says, that's what I want. Go make that. And that's how Rugrats happened.
The designs for Rugrats, when I showed them around, it's like, ugh, they're kind of ugly. I'm like, I know. I love that. I love ugly.
How come everybody draws babies as these beautiful ones? When they first come out, heads are kind of weird looking, kind of funny looking, and that's why the Rugrats were drawn like they were. And that was so real.
The writing was so clever. The characters were so fresh looking. You'd never seen anything on TV like that. Everybody fell in love with it immediately.
I know. Let's play with my new ball.
Tommy was modeled after Paul Germain's son. He's the leader, and he is fearless.
Who's with me? Let's go.
If my main character is this intrepid leader, then I thought my next character had to be this guy who was fearful. And that was Chucky.
I don't know, Tommy. I don't think this is such a good idea. Oh, come on. Don't be a baby.
So we had Phil and Lil, who were we always thought of them as the peanut gallery. They're just crazy. And then we also thought, who do we have as a villain? And when I was in 5th grade, I used to get picked on by this girl bully. And I thought, that's cool. I've never seen a girl bully before. And what if the key to her is that she's really sweet and cute to the adults and she's a monster to the other kids?
When we get to the party, Daddy, can I play with little Tommy?
Sure, sweetie.
Listen up, dummy. This may be your birthday, but when the presents are open, I get first dibs on the toys.
Gabor Chupo, who was one of the other creators of the show and my boss, came to me and said, I've got a great idea for the music for this show. I want to get this guy, Mark Mothersbaugh, to do the sound for the show. And I thought, well, that's the guy from Devo. You're not going to be able to get him. We did all this research, and finally we tracked him down, and he was really into doing it. They were all these weird instruments that sounded childlike and creepy and yet cute at the same time. It was really perfect for what the tone of the show was.
With Doug, Jim Jenkins had been one of the original puppeteers in Pinwheel. And he went off, worked for Sesame Street on small animated projects, and wrote a book called Doug.
I got a phone call. They're looking for original ideas to make into animation. So I went over to Nickelodeon with this book proposal. Doug got a new pair of shoes.
He came in with his book, which was like bound together from, you know, FedEx or something. And I looked at Jim, and I looked at his drawing of Doug, and I talked to Jim, and his sweet demeanor and his vulnerability was all that I needed.
If you know Jim Jenkins, he is the most decent, kind, lovely human being. And this series was about a wonderfully kind guy. It just was Jim Jenkins.
Later, she told me that what she had done is run to the person she reports to and said, I like this guy. I want to take him to pilot. That just doesn't happen. That is a miracle, and it changed my life. Doug is about as real as I can think of depicting the life of an 11-and-a-half-year-old kid. It's animated, and it's super exaggerated with what's the best and the worst that could happen in Doug's imagination. But to me, it feels very real. I think a lot of kids aren't the most popular, and they're not the big loser. They're sort of here in the middle. I think that's the majority of what kids are dealing with. Taking chances, believing in yourself, trusting your friends. Doug's fortunate to have Skeeter as a best friend and somebody that's a lot easier, breezier, about life.
Yo, man, let me take care of this. The new kid wants 3 moo cows, 1 no cukes, 1 no sneakers, 1 wet one, 4 tubers, and 4 for the vine. You want anything else?
Well, how do you order a salad from the salad bar?
1 salad from the salad bar.
And Patty, oh my goodness, Patty, who's so understanding and patient with his craziness. From the moment Doug arrives in Bluffington, he sees this girl on a bicycle, and he's done. Trying to find the voice of Patty Mayonnaise. I could hear it. I could hear it in my head, and I just couldn't find it. And we were casting all over the place. And I was at home in New York City in my apartment getting ready for work, and the TV's on in the background, and all of a sudden I hear this voice in a commercial. It happened to be a mayonnaise commercial.
Today this fella comes in, says he'll have chicken salad. Then he won't. Then he will. I say, darling, make up your mind. Says he's cutting down on cholesterol. I show him Kraft cholesterol free. Welcome back to Mayo, I say.
And I'm like, that's the voice. That's it. That girl right there, that's her. That's Patty Mayonnaise.
Are you doing anything on Friday night?
No, well, not yet, I mean.
Well, would you like to go see a movie?
Sure. Who else is going?
Well, nobody yet. I mean, I wasn't planning to ask anybody.
You weren't?
Did you want to invite someone else?
Well, no. Well, that is, you mean, just me and you?
Well, yeah.
Oh.
I mean, if you don't want to, that's okay.
No, I mean, yes. I mean, well, it sounds great.
Oh, good. We'll meet you in front of the Uniplex Friday at 7:30.
Sounds great. See ya.
See ya.
Wow, just me and Patty.
I'd say the number one question asked of me when we tour or whatever is, when is Doug gonna kiss Patty? And we held that off. You know, you wanna keep that tension, but also I like the innocence of where it is. He dreams about it plenty. It was simple, and I think because of that, it was beautiful.
Hello. Hope you like Bluffington.
I love Bluffington.
When Doug needed a alter ego superhero, I'm thinking of what is the most unexpected, unlikely of heroes? And I thought about a quail.
Quail Man, fighting a never-ending battle for truth, justice, and the way of the quail.
The quail, they sit still, hoping you walk by. That's their power. Restraint is their big power. I love that they would use that instead of big muscles or, you know, flames. It would just be being patient. Doug messed up on a regular basis. He always had a fork in the road and took the wrong fork and went, whoa, and then got on the right track. That feels a lot like how life really works.
I had set up in a hotel room and I had people coming in to pitch things. John Kricfalusi came in. He had 4 projects that he was pitching. The only thing that I liked was there was a dog and a cat in his project called Your Gang. I said, if you take that dog and cat, let's pull those out and let's create a show around them because those characters are incredible. Things that we did in Ren and Stimpy were scary for Nickelodeon. It didn't look like anything else. I guess we just wanted to be kind of as sickening as possible.
How you fellers doing?
Fortunately, I was working for somebody, Jerry Laybourne. Her theory was that when she hired somebody to do a job, she let us do it. So I didn't have a lot of people looking over my shoulders. I don't think anybody looked at our storyboards before we shot. And it probably shows now that there wasn't a lot of oversight, because especially with Ren and Stimpy, there's some pretty wild and crazy stuff in there. Animators are very sneaky people. I didn't even know what a dingleberry was.
You can string the dingleberry garland.
We had such great talent on that show. Vicki Jensen, who was doing background painting, I had her direct the first show that she's ever directed. It was about the village that made that show. I mean, Lynn Naylor, Jim Smith, Vincent Waller, Bob Camp. Bob Camp, he's amazing. I mean, he wrote the log song.
What rolls downstairs, motor and pairs, rolls over your neighbor's dog. What's great for a snack and fits on your back? It's long, long, long. It's long, long. It's big, it's heavy, it's wood. It's long, long. It's better than that, it's good.
Ren and Stimpy, because of the crossover audience, MTV thought this should be for us. It's our audience, which it was. We were drawing their audience to Nickelodeon. I think that what Ren and Stimpy did for Nickelodeon was bring in a whole new audience.
Happy, happy, joy, joy. Happy, happy, joy, joy. Happy, happy, joy, joy. Happy, happy, joy. Happy, happy, joy, joy. Happy, happy, joy, joy. Happy, happy, joy, joy, joy.
Ren and Stimpy was groundbreaking for Nickelodeon. It's just that simple. It was groundbreaking.
As far as the Nicktoons growing, definitely you wanted to see what was going to be the incoming freshmen, you know, the new guys.
After the 3 original series launched and it was time to start doing other pilots, Joe Murray came in with his pitch for Rocco.
Good as new.
Rocco's Modern Life.
It was a combination of the sitcom, like Rugrats, And Ren and Stimpy, which is crazy. And it had a lot of heart, like Doug, too. I mean, Heifer and Rocco's relationship was so great.
Rocco! You don't want to be hanging with big, fat, bovine pork man!
That bovine dog is my best friend, and if he's not good enough for your club, I'm not good enough.
Rocco had a lot of irreverence. We had set this pace with Ren and Stimpy that you could push the envelope and, you know, bust it wide open.
Rocco is one of the cartoons that made it okay for cartoons to be funny again. I think then and now, as new people discover Rocco and as the kids who grew up on it go into adulthood, they're just still discovering how subversive it was.
Better split up and look for food.
We were like the first original cartoons on cable. The idea that there would be a network that would show cartoons every day and then eventually 24 hours a day, that had never happened in history before. So it was the beginning of a revolution, but we didn't know that.
That was their vision for what Nicktoons would look like, and every show that was animated after that really kind of came out of that likeness.
Next Friday, catch a sneak peek of the next level of game shows, Nick Arcade, after the Nick Hit List at 7, 6 Central, only in Nick's Ozone.
I've always liked game shows growing up, and game shows went away, I think, for a long time. Mark did such a spectacular job with Double Dare. I always thought him as the quintessential game show host. And then you had Nick Arcade, which was sort of a new technology show. And then you had Phil Moore doing it, who was also great at what he did with his endless supply of energy.
All right, thank you, and welcome to Nickelodeon Arcade, where your video savvy and your video game skills are put to the ultimate test. They wanted to have an original element to Nick Arcade aside from the end game. Basically, they bookend the show with an original game at the front and an original thing at the end. In the middle, we played what you knew. We're about to face off in a game we call Brainstorm. And in this game, each team has to protect their cerebral neurons from these incoming nerve impulses. The face-off games, when we started out, was really just glorified Pong. It really was, you know, they disguised Pong. That's what they did. And I would say from here, it's safe to say that yellow team wins. All right, yellow team. Right, get back over.
Well, being on Nick Arcade with Danny Cookshee, it was pretty cool because the guys got to go against the girls.
Could you possibly do the song for me? Going, can't wanna.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3. Can't wanna. We hold you in our hearts, and when we think about you, it makes me wanna fart. Yeah.
The video zone, when you went inside that was really just blue screen. And anything that you touched had to be physically built. So when you saw the kids walk upstairs, there was a blue staircase. And everything was designed exactly in the shape that you saw on TV. In order to see where to move around, they had television monitors strategically placed all over.
It was thoroughly odd because you're playing these games and you're staring off at these monitors and you can't really see what's going on. It was a lot of fun. I would have loved to have done a lot more of the game shows.
And then, of course, they came up with Legends of the Hidden Temple. It was like a Raiders of the Lost Ark game show.
In Nickelodeon's never-ending quest to give you what you want comes Legends of the Hidden Temple, the first game show that lets kids live out legendary adventures. It's physical, metaphysical.
Olmec is the star of the show. He really is. I mean, he's this big, weird rock that sits in the middle of the set, and he basically guides everybody with his stories and his legend and sets the whole thing up for kids to succeed and try to conquer and achieve the lesson of the day. It was just a big, giant haunted house is what it was. And if you're a kid, you're watching that show, you got the crap scared out of you because you're trying to make it through something and you never know when some freaky dude's gonna come out of some room and grab you. And what a beautiful thing that was. Now that was television.
Oh, God, Guts was so fun. What we tried to do was show kids, we're not doing a cheap little television network for you. We're making this as interesting and as exciting as we possibly can.
Welcome to Guts, the action sports show that's gonna make you sweat. Hello, everyone. I'm Mike O'Malley. Welcome to the Extreme Arena, home of Nickelodeon Guts, the action sports show where kids live out their greatest sports fantasies.
It was a much more physical game than we'd had, and we were always concerned about not having boys win everything, so it had to have enough stuff in the game that a girl could have a chance of winning.
These game shows were really amazing. Nickelodeon really tapped in something completely unique that wasn't like any other network.
Hey! Nick!
Nickelodeon, from the very beginning, was always conscious of who was in front of the television set at what time of the day. So the early part of the day was devoted to preschoolers. That was their time, and that's really where Nick Jr. came from.
Nick Jr. really filled a void that wasn't there. They were doing these wonderful new shows for kids and just blew everything wide open when it came to the preschool set.
We were trying to have a host for the morning, and Scott Webb came in with a thing called Face. And Face was crazy. And I had remembered in my studies that you shouldn't do disembodied parts for kids, that scares them. So I said to Scott, I don't know, like, you're not supposed to do disembodied parts. What do you think? He said, I think this Face takes the whole screen and they're not gonna know it's a disembodied part. And Face was just a charming, charming host for preschool stuff.
Oh, hi. It's me, Face. I'm looking for Blue. She's a puppy.
And she's blue.
Nick Jr. was still looking for its footing in terms of what is it? What's the mission? What's the goal? What's the signature show for Nick Jr.? And so Brown Johnson wanted to create a game show for preschoolers because Double Dare was so huge. What would that look like for little ones? And so she had asked me to sit in meetings where creators would pitch ideas about game shows where there'd be like relay races with 3-year-olds, or like give a 3-year-old a clicker and they would answer questions. I would just have it all over my face. Like, this is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Like, this is never gonna work. So much so that she looked at me and she was like, well, what would you do? You know, what? And I was like, all right, let me think about that. And so Blue's Clues was born out of that desire to be a game show for preschoolers where kids were interacting and playing along the way you would on a game show.
We are the 4 Blues Clues. Wonder where they are.
A clue, a clue!
Oh. Oh, did you see a clue? Where? Where's the clue? I can't find the clue.
Right there!
Oh.
Because we were inherently fun and active and interactive. You had to take notice because kids were screaming at the TV.
The interactive aspect was instrumental in educating kids. Kids could learn shapes and sizes and dances and all these kinds of things in a little half-hour programming. So it was pretty astounding.
Hi. Come on in. We're so glad you're here.
I'm a huge Fred Rogers fan, and so what we wanted was a live action person who could talk directly to kids. We were looking for a Matthew Broderick, Ferris Bueller, camp counselor type of person, whereas Steve, when he came in, he was this like skater punk dude, right? Like just a total dude who thought he was coming in to like do voiceover role. And when we told him what it was, he was like, all right, cool, you know? And we had said, can you, for the network, dress a little bit more conservative, a little bit preppier? And he did, and I think he'll still say he hates those pants and everything that we made him wear. But his reaction to the camera, the way that he talked to kids, got kids, we did research, got kids screaming back to him right away.
You know, with me and you and my dog Blue, we can do anything that we wanna do. Bye-bye. See you later. Bye. Come again. Bye-bye.
guys watch some TV, okay? We'll be upstairs.
Don't fight over the remote.
We won't.
Bye. Bye. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
We wanted to do primetime shows for kids, but it was very hard to beat that economics. So we decided Saturday night was a very bad night for television. Let's give it up to kids.
On Saturday nights, there's a group of people who are watching TV. And there are people who are too young to be on a date and too old to be in bed. And voila, Snick.
They called it Snick, Saturday Night Nick, where everybody would sit on the big orange couch.
Oh, Saturday night on Nickelodeon. Snick was every kid's dream of what Saturday night should be.
In that 2-hour block, Snick provided a variety of programming for kids.
There's a little bit of everything for everyone, and I think Are You Afraid of the Dark really, stuck out in that lineup.
But every Saturday night, explore a side of Nickelodeon you never knew existed when we ask, are you afraid of the dark? Nick's new show spins ghastly tales of ordinary kids and their not-so-ordinary encounters with the supernatural.
Oh my gosh, Are You Afraid of the Dark? That was an awesome show. That show used to scare me.
Are You Afraid of the Dark was Twilight Zone for kids. We took very real kids who were going through very real dilemmas that all kids could relate to, and then they happened to run into a boogeyman.
Are You Afraid of the Dark was a group of kids who would, I guess, sneak out of their parents' place and meet up in the woods and tell ghost stories around a campfire, which, when I explain it like that, it sounds a little creepy.
Revolved around the Midnight Society, who met every week to tell stories, and the primary part of the episode was the story itself.
Clowns and ghosts and random things popping out of doors and walls. I think that was Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Are You Afraid of the Dark was co-created by me and my partner, Ned Candle. And the original idea was bedtime stories for lazy parents. We were going to get some old guy, some old actor, who everyone knew who was out of work. And we put him in a big easy chair in front of a roaring fire. It was all comfy, and he'd have a big book that said fairy tales on it. And he'd read fairy tales. The problem came in when we tried to decide what kind of stories were we going to tell. It was fairy tales. We're going to tell Little Red Riding Hood, Three Little Pigs. It was boring as whatnot. So Ned asked me the question that will live in infamy. He said, what kind of stories did you like when you were a kid? And I said, I like scary stories. So suddenly fairy tales became scary tales. But then having some old guy sitting in a chair reading scary tales to kids was creepy. So it's like, well, who tells tales, scary tales, where they themselves aren't scary? It's like, well, it's kids sitting around a campfire. Okay, so the old guy gets nixed. So let's have kids sitting around a campfire telling ghost stories. Bing, they like that, and that's how it took off.
I was always excited to join the cast of Are You Afraid of the Dark because as a member of the Midnight Society, I got to sit in the storyteller's chair and actually throw the magic dust on the fire and say, submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society, I call this story. And to this day, people still ask me, what was in the magic dust? What was in the magic dust? And you'll never know, ever.
The powder was Coffee Mate.
It was actually Coffee Mate.
It actually was non-dairy creamer because that stuff is petroleum-based and it burns.
There was a pyro effect for the fire to sort of, do that boom thing. But it actually helped it a little bit too. So there, the secret is out.
DJ also believed that kids were a lot smarter than you give them credit for, and that they could handle more sophisticated subjects, and that he could also push the horror or the scariness of it, further.
I think this was the difficulty that DJ had as well, trying to convince Nickelodeon to do this show, was the fact that, yes, you are trying to scare kids.
They said, we may get pushback. So there was a mandate up front. They said, try to find literary antecedents to draw your stories from. So that if parents call and start picketing outside the offices, our comeback can be, What are you talking about? This is classic literature. But the pilot we did was called The Tale of the Twisted Claw, which is the take on The Monkey's Paw. Tale of Midnight Madness. It's the Pied Piper of Hamelin. We did Jekyll and Hyde. We did Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Never once did we get pushback.
It didn't talk down to kids. It thought of kids as being more sophisticated, and it gave them a more sophisticated product.
I think it's just a testament to what that show brought and how different it was for its time and how it stuck out and really struck a chord with kids.
Tommy Lynch did Alex Mack. He had this designed as a boy at the center. I can't remember if it was Herb Scannell or me who said, you know, it really should be a girl at the center.
I should just face it. I'm boring.
And it was much more interesting with a girl at the center.
It was a coming-of-age show about a girl who gets doused with a chemical that gives her superpowers. Not superpowers, special abilities. Let's call them that. The morphing did change a bit from the pilot. In the pilot, my clothes morphed off, and I was like behind a box. Like, thank God someone had the right idea to be like, yeah, no, let's not make it like that. We did not have a ginormous budget for much, and actually I think it served us. I mean, truly, like the stuff with the telekinesis, it was like on fishing wire. Alex was me. I mean, it was me. And you know, the parallel is very obvious. It's like this kind of extraordinary thing happened to me at the age of 12, and I got on a TV show. Not only got on a TV show, but was starring on a TV show. We were sort of experiencing this at the same time, like how things shift and how things don't shift and what's important, and just dealing with being the age that you are and sort of understanding who you are as a human and getting to know yourself a little bit better.
Fresh out the box. Stop, look and watch. Ready yet? Get set. It's all that.
All that was a sketch comedy for kids.
It was really a new, fresh idea. Nobody had ever done a kids sketch comedy show.
If I had to compare it to something, I think it was closest to In Living Color, with the racially diverse cast and the R&B and the hip hop.
We had guest performances done by everybody that's very well known now was on our show.
We started off with amazing people, right? Like TLC did our theme song. It was almost like youth is wasted on the young. You didn't realize that you were in the presence of people that were going to be great.
It was wacky and it was messy and it was a little edgy when you think about what was on Nickelodeon at that point. Like, you know, a lot of shows didn't have Coolio stopping by.
Being on the set of a kid's show, I don't think that was any different than, you know, performing for anybody else.
I remember Coolio was the first time like somebody blew the studio up with like weed, and it was like, oh my God, what is that smell?
It was very green back then.
You know, they kind of kept him in the back in his room, and we weren't like allowed to kind of go there. So it was like this very like invisible curtain that we would always kind of stand at and like look to see like what the music people were doing and stuff.
Of course, I don't remember because it was a Green Day, obviously.
It was cool to have Chris Farley there, but I was very much of that age where I was watching the cast of Saturday Night Live and all of the movies that came out of that, so that was really cool.
He did a Cooking with Randy and Mandy, and that was such a blessing.
Cooking with Randy.
He's a master chef all the way from Chicago. Please welcome Chef Farley.
He was a ketchup guy. He loved ketchup. That was his thing. And I loved chocolate, and we were battling to see which one was better. We rehearsed it once, and we shot it once, and he was out of there. He was not playing around, but he was so nice. He showed me what being like a real pro was all about.
With all my characters, I like to add something to it. And so with Good Burger, I remember how it started was on a sketch called Dream Remote. My line was, here's your pizza. But I did it with the Ed voice, and I was like, well, here's your pizza. And they were like, yo, we love this voice. And so they took that voice and created a whole world around like Ed, the Good Burger guy. During rehearsals, it was cool, but I felt like he needed something else. And I went into the hair room and I saw the hair, this Milli Vanilli hair, is I Want to Be Down Brandy wig. And I put that on and it just took off, man. It was just so hilarious to me, man. And it was just great. Ed was born, you know what I mean? Yeah.
Just don't think about tinkling. Don't think about tinkling, okay?
Hello, I'm Connie Muldoon.
Okay, well, what do you want, Connie?
Well, I have a medium good soda here, which is plenty for me to drink. But we Muldoons like to drink out of large cups. May I have a larger cup?
Yeah, okay, here you go.
Thank you. I'll transfer it now.
Okay, wait, you don't have to do that right here. Oh.
Doing all that was like a great training ground. It was my first job in show business and television.
You got these kids from all different cities, you know, Chicago, Atlanta, New York. It gave a lot of hope to a lot of kids coming from different walks of life saying like, well, I can do this too.
Any little child could go, I look like him or her. And I think that's important.
It was just like full of good time energy. We were all young. We were all out of town basically because nobody was from Orlando. So it was like being on like paid vacation doing something awesome to get paid. You know what I mean? It was the best ever. And plus we thought we were cool.
When they approached Keenan and I to do our own show, man, that was awesome. They saw us a lot, you know, behind the scenes and having fun.
We were hanging out like 24/7. So, you know, around all of that, I think they were like, let's see if like, you know, they can do a show and like make something else out of this whole thing, like make a little spinoff. And yeah, it worked.
Oh, here it goes.
Everybody out there, go around and tell your homeboys and homegirls it's time for Keenan and Kel. The Keenan and Kel theme song would probably become one of the most important things I did in my career. I mean, because it introduces me to a whole new audience and a new legion of fans year after year after year.
Kel Kimball kind of messed up a lot of stuff at times, you know what I mean?
You need one dude to be zany and one dude to be grounded, but have zany ideas at the same time. And that's what makes them friends. Because every time I would try to like condemn him for doing something stupid, I would have what I think is a brilliant idea that turns out to be just as stupid, you know what I mean? So that's what I think made that bond work.
This is a nice sweater.
Thanks. My grandma knitted it for me before she passed away.
Oh, that is so nice. I mean, not that your grandmama passed away, but I'm saying that she knitted it before. It's a very nice sweater.
Thanks. I only wear it on special occasions.
Did you wear it at your grandmama's funeral?
I don't know, he just made me laugh so much. He's so freaking funny. And I would try to do, you know, reciprocate and try to like bring up funny things or whatever, but that dude he's a beast.
Who loves orange soda? Kel loves orange soda. Is it true? Is it true? Oh yes, it's true. Ooh. I do. Ooh.
Shooting that was just a great experience. We were friends, you know what I mean? So it was cool to be on our own show doing what we do all the time anyway.
We were no longer a cable television channel. We were something gigantic for kids.
Jerry Laybourne had a point of view on Nickelodeon that drove all of us. We could fail and do a crummy show, but we couldn't not take a risk.
The energy was such that we thought we were going to change the world. Like, there was no question that we were doing amazing, great work.
It was like driving to an extremely professional $1 million playground. Everybody's imagination, everybody's mind was just, if it worked and it had fun and it made you laugh, it didn't matter if it looked normal. It didn't matter if it felt right.
Nickelodeon was a relationship between us and kids and us. And our mission statement was to connect with kids and connect kids with each other through entertainment. That's only one manifestation of Nickelodeon.
Picture this. Nickelodeon takes over your school and puts you in charge.
It was like Nick Takes Over Your School, Kids' Choice Awards, and Big Help. They were all just like big reunions for us.
Who sent in the postcard?
The postcard. Send it in and you have the power to win Nick Takes Over Your School.
Nick Takes Over Your School is exactly that. They would come in and they would just like take over everything. Put green and orange stuff everywhere.
But I remember I only did it once and I had a stomach virus and I spent the entire time in the bathroom. And that was my only trip to Naples, Florida. I took over their entire plumbing system. It was kind of messed up.
Let's talk about merchandise. Nickelodeon at the time had not really gotten to that yet. And they hadn't gotten to it for a lot of decent reasons. First of all, Jerry had some really super honorable principles about not exploiting kids. Suddenly, she was creating original series. So I think it was hard to get your head around making toys from that initially. Like, obviously, she got there.
We got offered a cereal, a Double Dare cereal that opened on two ends, and you poured it on this thing and turned it upside down. And they offered us $1 million, and Jerry turned it down. And she said, we're not doing that, okay? They get bombarded with that enough. Nickelodeon was classy enough to this day, and they do not sponsor that stuff because they could take in $1 bazillion, but have chosen not to do it.
Ann Kramer, I remember coming in to do Nickelodeon magazine and then the whole development of the merchandising and licensing. Suddenly there was a physical manifestation of Nickelodeon. And that's what Ann and David did, which was to get it out there.
I believe we got into all the different products that we got into because we wanted to touch kids in their lives where they could be. We wanted to be able to have a magazine they could stick in their back pocket and have in their backpack and take with them wherever they went. We wanted to be able to have toys that they could play with that were unusual.
I'm not sure if you can see it on camera, but GAC is basically a fluorescent amorphous blob of goo. For my money, nothing sums up that Nickelodeon spirit than this wonderful blob of mess.
What is GAC?
GAC is great stuff. Oozy.
GAC really became kind of a cultural phenomenon. Nickelodeon partnered with Mattel. And back then, Mattel had the best chem lab in the business. And they essentially said, okay, Mattel, we're your partner. Show us all the ideas that the other guys rejected. The Mattel people came to Nickelodeon and said, well, we've got this recipe for this funny blob of goo and we don't know what to do with it. And when Nickelodeon saw that, they said, that's for us.
With the GAC packaging that we made, we forced Mattel to spend a lot more money than they wanted to just on the packaging because we designed it in a splat and then we made the lid so that when you put your GAC back into the container, it would fart. We created GAC, we created Floam, we created something called Zog Logs, which I adored but kind of sucked.
Grab Zog Logs, add a little water. They'll stick together just like they oughta. Zog Logs.
Video cassettes seem so old school now, but video cassettes always came out of their sleeves. And then you would have just these piles of things all over the floor, and who knew what video was what. So I made our videos orange. Everything had a kind of logic to it that was about highlighting and sort of promoting the brand, but at the same time, over-serving our kids.
And I think that for a long time, Nickelodeon kept the same path. You know, they came up with great stuff with SpongeBob.
Oh, who lives in a pineapple under the sea?
The biggest change at Nickelodeon came when SpongeBob SquarePants and Dora the Explorer started to deliver a lot of money in licensing. Once a corporation starts to taste that kind of success, it's very difficult for the people at that corporation to remember that that was not originally the goal.
But you look at Nickelodeon today, and they're doing really well. Dora the Explorer grossed $1 billion, okay? We never grossed $1 billion.
I think things changed for Nickelodeon when you weren't the underdog anymore and you weren't growing and wanting really hard. We really wanted to be seen in the same light as a Disney, as a PBS, and really have these amazing shows on the air that you could feel really proud of. I think all of a sudden, when you're at the top, what do?
You want to embrace growth and change, and I think any business like Nickelodeon has to grow and change.
I felt no sadness when Nick Studios closed down because it served a real purpose. It put us on the map with advertisers. It gave us a great facility to operate in, but it wasn't the easiest thing.
Kids would get down there thinking, I'm actually going to be able to crawl inside of Nickelodeon. And over the years, a lot of things were figured out. We couldn't produce every show down there.
When I got word that it closed, it was like, yeah, it's a piece of your childhood, like closing up, and that's sad. It was like its own kind of little world,
Listen closely, Harvey's gonna tell you everything you want.
Not many people know this, but I quit Nickelodeon. I was going out on those tours on a regular basis. And one day my son said to me when he was 10, 11 years old, how come every weekend you're with everybody else's kids, but you're not with us? And I flew to New York the next Monday and quit.
For me, I had had a great run, 16 years at Nickelodeon, and we got to do so much. But I could sort of see that you have to scale and you have to be a big business. And that wasn't really what I was interested in. I was interested in making new stuff, and I wanted to take a risk on myself.
Jerry Laybourne leaving Nickelodeon was a shock, not just because she was leaving something that she had birthed and created, but that she was going to Disney. That's what kind of blew our minds.
We all cried. That's how, even Herb Scannell, who was about to be president of the company, was in tears. We just really believed in what she was doing and wanted to continue to work under that kind of vision.
We had a bigger mission. We had an audience we cared about. We had an audience that we wanted to make a difference for. And I didn't really realize how special that was until I left.
If you missed the orange years, you missed the laboratory. You missed the building of the lab and the experiments that went on. And also an understanding of kids that was unique.
We were given the golden ticket. We were given the orange ticket. Here's your orange ticket, and that orange ticket says, you got a good idea, my friend, go with it. And there were so many great shows that came out of it.
You take raw talent with raw producers and real kids, and you get great TV. And that's what Double Dare and all those other shows on Nickelodeon during the 80s and 90s were delivering.
People come up to me and literally say verbatim, they say, you made my childhood, which is an amazing thing.
I get the, hey, you look familiar. Did we go to high school together? Were you on a, wait a minute. Were you on a show? What show were you on? Was it Are You Afraid? You were on Are You Afraid of the Dark?
The fact that it resonates so much with people and people still want to talk about it, it's awesome.
I'm thrilled to be a part of the era of Nickelodeon television that I was. I got a lot of love, and I think that our show gave people a lot of love too.
It was a great part of my life, and it gave me a career. So if you think I'm sick of hearing we grew up watching you, what a great feeling. Who gets that?
Through that chaos, something very original happened, and I feel really fortunate to be a part of it.
I never did get slimed. And that could have been, take your pick of which shows to get slimed on.
We really wanted to make a place for kids to actually have a good time, but learn about themselves at the same time.
We were a progressive, broad-minded network that cherished everybody, regardless of race, ethnicity, We tried to broaden people's minds about the arts with opera and doo-wop and jazz. We tried to open eyes to new kinds of creative ways of visualizing things, to playing with our audience to come up with new things. The legacy is you. The legacy is every kid who watched us.
I am Al, also known as The Sole Purpose. I'm pretty much known as the biggest Nickelodeon collector out there on the social media platform. My Nickelodeon collection started back maybe over 12 years ago, give or take. I love every item from the cheapest to the most expensive. I cherish every one of them. When I first started collecting Nickelodeon merchandise, I thought that I was probably the only one collecting it, and I thought maybe that this is something I shouldn't share. And then as I got more into it, I started realizing that there was a lot more people into this.
Let's face it, the pinnacle of athletic achievement for basically our whole generation was a piece of the aggro crag. Now, I'm not that athletic. I never went to Orlando, so I never actually got a chance to win one. But I do have eBay, so I eventually did find one after 13 years of searching. So thanks, Mike, and thanks, Nickelodeon, for having the best show ever.
So for my 31st birthday, Emily threw me a Nickelodeon party.
All of our friends got on board. I had costumes and themed food, slime-filled cupcakes. I bought 500 to 1,000 ball pit balls, a giant swimming pool. I knew I was gonna do a double dare course.
The grand prize winners won the aggro crag. Second place won a big stickly that I made. And then we just basically said, hey, who wants to get slimed?
So this is the Mondo Gallery. We do limited edition screen printed posters, and we do soundtracks and collectibles. We wanted to celebrate Nicktoons and Nickelodeon and that culture and that era of just amazing programming. We have people come out and have a good time and just kind of relive their past and experience childhood again.
It was fun to kind of relive the nostalgia and get to have a picture with a giant nose and try and dig your hands up inside of it.
It helps us to connect with that inner child, and it brings us back to a time when life was just a little bit more fun. It was funny, and it was gross, and it was stupid, and it was stuff you wanted to watch, and it was great. And it's still funny.
It gave me like a different perspective to every other channel. It reflected things that normal, typical kids went through, no matter where they came from. We paid attention to the one thing that paid attention to us.